Greetings, everyone. If you're joining us, I hope you're joining us for the Met and Wikipedia Women's History Month meetup online. So you are in the right place. My name is Andrew Lee, and we'll be introducing the folks on the call and the panel later on. But hopefully you are here for the Met and Wikipedia Virtual Edit Meetup for Women's History Month. So thanks for being here. Please do tell us where you're coming from. We are using a system called StreamYard, which allows us to go out to multiple platforms at the same time. So you might be seeing us on Facebook, on YouTube, or on Twitter, Periscope. So welcome, all folks around the world. Please let us know where you're watching from. We are always amazed by how many folks from around the world come to join us in editing Wikipedia, the #1 reference site in the world, and one of the top 10 most visited websites in the world. So we're seeing people from all over the world come here, from Finland, from Turkey, amazing, from Europe. So please do let us know where it comes from. South Carolina, Michigan, Croatia, New Jersey. And we'll get started in a few minutes. We'd like to start a little bit early just to get the social media warmed up. If you have not been to the meetup page, you can go to the page that you see on the screen on Wikipedia. An easy way to go there is if you're in Wikipedia itself, you can go into that search Wikipedia box and just type in WP:, this is all caps, this will be WP: Met WHM, which stands for Met Women's History Month. Or you can go to the URL that you see scrolling along the bottom there, enwp.org, which is a shortcut to Wikipedia, English Wikipedia, and type in WP: Met WHM. So great to see so many folks from Brazil. Oh, we've got a Brazil connection that we'll be talking on later on. So Giovanna's there on our panel from Brazil. So welcome. From Portugal, from Brazil, from Spain, from Albany, New York, from Canada, France, Paris, France. Amazing. We'll be talking about a French artist today as well. So someone says, I miss you, Met. Thank you for that. We all miss the Met. And Jeannie Choi, who's here from the Met, will be talking about what the Met is doing right now. And it is open in limited amounts, right, Jeannie? So it is possible to go.
Yes. We're open, but just at 25% capacity. I miss the Met too. I've only been there once in the past year. So
ooh, yeah.
Wow.
So San Francisco, California, Hungary, China. My goodness, this is amazing. Peru.
Wow.
Vietnam.
Always want to visit Cusco.
So please do go to the meetup page there. And hopefully, if you want to be fully involved today, the best thing to do is to create an account on Wikipedia. There should be a create account button in the upper right-hand corner. Or you go to the link that Richard, who will introduce in a second, register.wikizeum.org. That's a shortcut. That's just a nice way to get to the registration for a Wikipedia account. So if you go there now, that'll save a lot of time when we start walking you through some of the things that you can do. Other folks from Virginia, New York City, Portugal. Wow. Hi, Alicia in Sweden. We've got some folks we know from the Wikipedia universe, but lots of new folks here. That's great to see. Susanna from Helsinki, welcome. Another person saying they miss the Met so much from Boston. Thanks so much. And just to give you a little bit more in terms of logistics for using this system, if you're on YouTube, we'll see your identity and we can bring up comments on a selected basis, right? So we can bring up folks from Uruguay, from Poland. So this is meant to be interactive. Please do let us know your thoughts and your observations as we start to walk you through how to edit Wikipedia and Wikidata. You can actually send us the things that you're working on, links to pages, links to items that you've helped improve. And that's what makes this so much more interesting as an interactive experience. So if you're on Facebook, you may need to go to streamyard.com/Facebook to authenticate so we can actually see your name on screen here. So we have folks from Norway that we can see on screen, or from France. Thank you for coming, all of you. And that makes it easier for us to see the name. Otherwise, we'll just kind of see an anonymous name from Facebook. So if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, you can authenticate yourself and we can see you on there. All right, so we'll get started in about a minute or so, or 2 minutes. If you can see the little timer in the bar left-hand corner, we'll be using the timer in different ways today. We're trying some new things as we are trying to work with the hundreds and folks that are out there joining us today. We're going to have little lessons on how to work with Wikipedia. Then we'll have like little 10-minute sprints where we're going to want people to work on things, and then we'll come back together after those 10 minutes and kind of see what's been going on. And you're welcome to share what you've been working on. So that little timer will become useful throughout the day, and we'll try to keep you in touch with what's going on throughout the day or throughout the next 2 hours or so. So go to register.wikimuseum.org if you don't have a Wikipedia account, and create one. That'll make things a lot easier as we go forward. And I highly recommend you add an email to that account in case you want to recover your password. It's the only way to recover your account is if you leave a password. If you leave an email in there. All right. So we'll get started in a second here. And you can go to the existing page here, the Meetup page, and start looking through some of the information that we have there. Don't worry if it's a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of information there, but we'll walk you through that. You can already see some of the things that we have in store for tasks on how to improve the articles about notable women artists and their artworks in Wikipedia and Wikidata. Okay, the address of this meeting. So if you look at the bottom of the page, the bottom of the screen, you will see that we have a link to this page. The shortcut to this is, I think, Richard, if we go to wikimuseum.org, it should just get you there. Is that right?
Yeah. And register.wikimuseum.org will help register you on our dashboard to help get your edits together, so we can see all the things that you create on Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects today.
Right. So we just created a shortcut with wikimuseum.org. Will get you to this page. That's the simplest way. Or you can go to the link in the scrolling message at the bottom. All right. Ooh, getting close. We are done. All right. So welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in a second and roll the video. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Met and Wikipedia Virtual Edit-a-thon Meetup for Women's History Month. My name is Andrew Lee, also known as user Fuzzheado on Wikipedia. I am the Wikimedia strategist with the Met Museum. I want to bring up our other two folks here from the Met. Hi, Jeannie. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie Choi. I'm the General Manager of Collection Information at the Met, where I oversee collection cataloging and digital assets. And I've been working with Wikidata and a lot during the past year. And I'm going to give a sort of an overview of women artists in our collection. And I'm so happy that you all have joined us. This is our second virtual edit-a-thon. Our last one was our fashion meetup last September, was very successful. So we're looking forward to a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jeannie. And I want to introduce Richard. Richard, tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Richard Nipel, user Pharos on the Wikimedia projects. Great to see everyone today. I'm partly as Wikimedian residents at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and also give my greetings from Wikimedia New York City, your local wiki chapter, if you're in New York. And I hope to share today some tools to create new articles about artworks, including translating articles, so we can find what articles on works by women that are in the Met collection that are not in your language yet, as well as a tool to create some new articles on artworks that are in the collection that have not been created yet. So it's a little automatic tool. So hope to share those, and glad to join people during Wiki Women's History Month and the Art and Feminism campaign.
Great, thank you so much. And as you might have seen in the pre-show that we had, we're going to be here for about 2 hours. So thank you for joining us. We have about 300 plus folks across the different social media networks that we have. You might be seeing us on Facebook or YouTube or Periscope on Twitter. So please do let us know where you're watching from if you have not already. It's just great to see so many folks from around the world here. And the rough idea of what we have today is to talk a little bit about the context of Women's History Month and what we're doing at the Met and trying to improve content in Wikipedia and its companion project Wikidata with Met content, and also with all the volunteer effort that hopefully you bring to the table today. So just to make sure we all know how to work this, if you comment on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, we can see your comments here and we can selectively bring them up on screen, which makes for a very nice interactive way to have a dialogue with you in the audience. So we will give you some basic information about how Wikipedia and Wikidata works and some of the stuff that we're doing with the Met. But then we want this to be an interactive type of session where we'll have about 10 minutes of introduction to some type of topic or some area of expertise. Then we're going to have some training and give you 10 minutes to work on some content. And hopefully through the social media site that you're on, you can actually send us the types of things that you're working on. And we're going to have these little sprints of 10 minutes of work, 10 minutes of evaluation and maybe learning some new things, and go back and forth. And I think this will keep everything lively and interesting for a lot of folks out there, even if you've never edited Wikipedia before. And even if you have edited Wikipedia, I'm pretty sure you'll learn something new today with this format. So we're looking forward to trying out this experiment. Before we go any further, Richard, why don't you tell folks really quickly about making sure they have an account, and then we'll have Jeannie talk a little bit about what we're doing at the Met with Women's History Month.
Yeah, I just wanted to share here. So we set up a little shortcut here for register.wikimuseum.org. It's a quick way to, if you have a Wikimedia account, to register as part of the edit campaign today. And if not, it's an easy way to start your Wikimedia career. If you don't have a username, we suggest picking something fun, maybe with a pun in it. Usually not your full name, but just something fun and interesting. That might be a pun or some other just random thing based on your interests or activities. So yeah, we welcome you to create a Wikipedia account, and that is your first step to being active in the Wikiverse.
And tell us, Richard, they will automatically be registered on the dashboard. Is that correct?
Yes. Once they go to this link, they will create an account and be automatically registered on the dashboard. We have how many people on the dashboard right now? We have about 50. We have 50 editors who are now registered on the dashboard. And if and let us know. We also have like a chat thing. Let us know if you'll let us know later if you're working in particular languages, because we also have to check. So we make sure we count, say edits made in Chinese or Bosnian.
Great, thank you so much. So Jeannie, why don't we have you share your screen, and we'll have you start talking about the content at the Met related to women's history and some really cool things that you found with Wikidata. Sure,
I'm just gonna, hope you all can see the slides. I just have a few slides that I wanted to show to talk about female artists in the Met. We have about 2,600 female artists, which is about 5% of our known artists, and they represent about 8% of the collection. And most of our works by female artists were created in the 20th century. You can see in this scatter graph that most of them were made between 1900 and the present day. And most of them were acquired. Well, we've been steadily acquiring, since the museum was founded. The two spikes you see in 2007, that's the Deanne Arbus Archive, which we acquired. And then 2009, there's a spike because that is when we acquired the Brooklyn Museum Costume Collection, which has a lot of female designers. And there's also a little spike in 1943. That was a lot of WPA works we accessioned then, and a number of them were created by women. And then this is a breakdown by department. So the Deanne Arbus Archive here to see our numbers. So the photograph department has the most, followed by the Costume Institute, drawings and prints, modern art, and the American wing. This is the first object in the collection that was created by female artists. It's a vase of flowers by Margaretha Haberman, Dutch artist, early 18th century. And this was acquired in 1871 at the very beginning of the Met's founding. And I just wanted to highlight a few women artists who some of you may not have known about. So one is Edmonia Lewis. She was American. She was an American sculptor, worked in the 19th century, and she was of African American and Native American descent. And we have two small sculptures by her, Hiawatha and Minnehaha. And we also have a group of quilts made by the Jeeves Bend quilters. They were a group of women working in Alabama in the 20th century. And this was part of our Souls Grown Deep collection we acquired in 2014. So these are a wonderful set of quilts. These are just three examples from Pearlie Kennedy Petway, Lucy Petway, and Sue Willie Seltzer. And there is a fairly decent Wikipedia article on Jeeves Bend, the Jeeves Bend quilters. There's no article about Pearlie Kennedy Petway. I think there's a basic article on Lucy Petway and a short article on Sue Willie Seltzer. So we would love if any of you want to contribute to these articles. It's a really great collection, and there's not a lot of information about them. And I wanted to show this. This is a knife handle, Japanese knife handle, and it's made by one of the very few women swordsmiths working in Japan in the late 18th and early 19th century, Sankodo Josui. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. But very little is known about her. So if there's anyone in Japan who out there who may know something about her, we'd love to, there's no article about her. I don't think there's a Wikidata item about her. All that is known is she worked in Edo, and she worked under another very well-known swordsmith. So just we would love to have more information about her. And I also wanted to bring up Mary Elizabeth Adams Brown. She was a collector of musical instruments, and she donated over 4,000 musical instruments to the Met, which basically formed the foundation of our musical instruments department. So I wanted to just, expand the focus of today's session, not just on female artists, but female collectors and female patrons. This is a painting by her, which we also have in our collection on the right by Andrew Zorn, and just two of the wonderful objects that she donated and collected: a rattle, Native American rattle, and a Javanese sasando, which is a type of plucked zither. And the great thing about the collection is she collected objects from all over the world, not just European instruments. So we have musical instruments from all corners of the globe given by her. And I wanted to mention three upcoming Met exhibitions featuring women artists. The first just opened this week, actually. Carol Beauvais, The Seances Aren't Helping. She created 4 sculptures that appear on the niches of the facade on the front of the building and museum. And this is our second commission. The first one's by Wengechi Mutu that went up last year. So this just opened on Monday. So if anyone is in New York City, please come by and look at the sculptures. And then we have a wonderful Alice Neal exhibition opening on March 22nd. This is the first New York City retrospective of her work in over 20 years. It's going to be a great show. And I also wanted to mention there will be a virtual opening on March 25th that is free and open to anyone. So if you go to our website, you can register, just sign up with your email, and you can attend the opening. It's going to be 30 minutes at 7 o'clock in the evening, and it will feature a tour of the show by 2 of the curators. And then a little further out in the summer, at the end of June, there's a photography exhibition opening called New Woman Behind the Camera, featuring female photographers from the mid-20th century, which we're going to talk about a little later because we have a list of them, potential work items. So that's what's happening at the Met, and I'm going to stop sharing. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Andrew.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeannie. And I think this would be a great time to show the Alice Neal video. Would that be right? That would, was showing the pretty cool, very short 2-minute video that we had about her. So let me make sure we show that.
I like to paint. I love to paint. In fact, I feel as though I'm living for a purpose, that life isn't just empty. One of the reasons I painted was to catch life as it goes by, hot off the griddle. After all, I represent the 20th century. I was born in 1900, and I've tried to capture the zeitgeist. I lived in Harlem for 25 years, Spanish Harlem. I wanted to show the environment plus the people that were living there. And if the world changes, of course your vision changes in a sense with the time. It isn't just that I'm older, it's that people also are different. Maybe I have changed also, I don't know. I don't feel either that there is definite female painting, you know. I don't think there's an iconography that goes especially with women. Long before they talked about being autobiographical, I was, and yet not completely, because there's aesthetics in my work. You see, art for me was more than a profession, it was also an obsession. I painted in obscurity for years and years. But if I didn't paint all the time, I probably wouldn't live. That's what keeps me alive.
Great. So that's something you can also work on today if you want to work on the biography of Alice Neal, or to work on anything that we have in Wikipedia and Wikidata related to that.
Sorry, Andrew, I just wanted to mention that video, that short video, which is about 2 minutes, is actually an excerpt from a longer interview, which that longer interview is about 20 minutes, and that is also on the Met's YouTube channel. There was a question in the chat for a link to that, the exhibition promo. So if you go to the Met's YouTube channel, you will see both the shorter version and the longer version. And the longer version is fascinating. She goes into great depth about describing many of her works and many of the works that are going to be in the show. So if you're an Alice Neal fan, I think you're really going to enjoy that video.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, so that's Alice Neal, and we'll also talk a little bit later about the we've singled out the 16 women photographers that will be part of the behind the camera exhibit coming up later this month, or not later this year. And so for now, I think what we'll do is give you folks a little bit of introduction to what we'll be doing today with editing content in Wikipedia. And you've heard Jeannie use the word Wikidata, and something that you might not have heard of much before, but we're going to have you folks have an opportunity to edit Wikidata. And it's probably kind of a strange word to you, so we're going to try to introduce that to you very quickly as one of the more interesting projects that has come along as Wikipedia has turned 20. We now have a companion project that tries to put content into a database for more interesting ways of accessing that content. So let me bring that up here right now and show you a little bit about what Wikidata is about. So again, my name is Andrew Lee. I am working with the Met as a Wikimedia strategist, and Richard is the Wikimedian in residence. And Richard, feel free to chime in. Richard and I have been doing a lot of work with Jeannie on bringing not only Wikipedia, the assets of the Met, but also into this new project called Wikidata. And it's really revolutionized the way that museums and libraries and other cultural institutions are connecting to each other, with Wikidata as a hub for the metadata for artists and artworks. So let me show you very quickly what this is about. So everyone has seen the little puzzle sphere before that is part of Wikipedia, but you might have never seen this kind of barcode-y thing, which is part of Wikidata. So if you were to think of Wikipedia articles as the things that you're familiar with, there's about 30,000 articles using Met images right now in Wikipedia, but there doesn't necessarily need to be a Wikipedia article about every single artwork in the Met, right? We've got very prominent, very famous artworks, but then we have a lot of other things that we probably don't need 500 words or 1,000 words for a Wikipedia article, but we'd still like to know about them, right? There's still significant works for an artist, or significant works of Egyptian culture or of Greek culture. So what do we do if Wikipedia can't hold them? And that's where Wikidata comes in, right? So we actually have not just Wikimedia Commons as a place to store images that support Wikipedia articles, but recently we've created a database called Wikidata. And the Wikidata database that we have takes a lot of the information that we have in Wikipedia, but also brings in new information from other cultural institutions. So you can find this at wikidata.org, and we'll be going to that multiple times today. And just think of it as a structured database of all notable works out there. So even works that are not notable enough to have a Wikipedia article, Wikidata can have a record or an item about them and link out to the information that's on the internet. So you can see why this is really interesting to museums and libraries that have a lot more than what we have even in English Wikipedia with 6 million articles. There's a lot more information out there that we're not capturing in Wikipedia, but we can do so with Wikidata. So if you were to think of Wikipedia as the multilingual encyclopedia of articles, think of Wikidata as a structured database of statements. Now, it's very abstract right now, but we'll show you that in a second. It supports Wikipedia along the way, and also organizes all the different digital assets we have in what we call the Wikimedia universe, right? So primarily what we're talking about when we talk about the Wikimedia environment is Wikipedia, Wikidata, and the image store, which is Wikimedia Commons. We have lots of other projects that are part of this Wikimedia environment, like a Wiktionary and Wikisource and other things, but these are the main three that we're talking about right now. So if you were to think about what is Wikidata really compared to Wikipedia, we like to sometimes call this in the museum and library world as they store things and not just strings, right? We store everything we can think of, not just text about things. So what's a good example of this? Well, you might see a sentence like this in Wikipedia, like the United States Congress is the bicameral legislature of the federal government of the United States, right? Or the Metropolitan Museum of Art is an art museum located in New York City. But instead of having a sentence like this stored like that, we can actually store the same information using almost like Lego blocks of information. And that's what we do with Wikidata. We'll store 3-part statements like United States Congress, instance of bicameral legislature, or we might say Met Museum is an instance of an art museum. And this is what's stored in Wikidata and allows us to do really neat things across different languages, because all we need to do is translate those little building blocks of information, right? So if we translate country to 300 different languages, then we get that benefit throughout the database that's in Wikidata. So here's an example of the contrast that we have. So we're going to be talking about this French painter, Rosa Bonheur, and you can see that the text in the upper left-hand corner is what you would read in Wikipedia, which is very useful, and you see this on Google. You see it when you do a search for her name. But wouldn't it be nice if we could do all kinds of interesting things with this information that we know about an artist? We can see here that it says she was born in 1822 and died in 1899. She was a French artist. But this is what we call kind of unstructured data. It's a written sentence. And if you wanted to see this in French and Spanish and German and other languages, you would have to put this through something like Google Translate. And we all know Google Translate's not perfect. So you might have its best guess at how to translate this. On the other hand, we could take all the information in that paragraph and break it out into little blocks of information, which is basically what Wikidata does. So for example, you will see in the rest of the screen there, the stuff that we store in Wikidata. So you will see date of birth, 16 March 1822 on the Gregorian calendar, place of birth, Bordeaux, date of death. So basically think of all the information we see in that paragraph but broken down into its elemental bits. And the cool thing about this is once you have it broken down there, you can do cool things like show me all women artists born in March 1822 in somewhere in France. And you can get that answer back from Wikidata within a second or two. That's the power of structuring this data rather than having to comb through all the Wikipedia articles to find this information. And that's, in its essence, what the benefit of Wikidata is. So what does this look like when we store it? You can see that you can imagine that all this information that we're storing about artists and artworks is like a gigantic sprawling graph that we store in this database. That's why Wikidata and databases of this type are often called graph databases. The cool thing is you don't have to know any of these details. Just know that it's kind of interesting that Wikidata stores all these different connections, and you can harness the power of these connections. And we'll show this to you later on, how we can use this to improve content in Wikipedia and Wikidata. So you'll see that one of Rosa Bonheur's most famous works is the Horse Fair, which the Met has. And you can see we can actually model this in Wikidata by saying not only is she the painter of this or the creator of this, but Horse Fair is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It is a painting. It is a creative work. She is a citizen of France. So by looking at this graph, we can actually ask Wikidata interesting questions, such as, show me all painters born in France who are women who have our art in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And that's how we create our work lists and how we can organize things faster and better with Wikidata. So what are the two things that we can do today that we're introducing to you using Wikidata? Well, why is it important? So I think there's two different areas that we're going to focus in on today. So one is visualization and discovery, right? It's one thing to read a Wikipedia article about a painting. It's another to say, we now have a tool to browse the universe of paintings in any way that you want. And that's basically what we can do with Wikidata. So for example, here's one where you can actually look at a timeline of all of her works, and that can be generated within a second on Wikidata by just saying, show me all of her paintings and the dates that they were created, and put it on a timeline. So you can actually have user-generated narratives. You can tell your own story or craft your own story with Wikidata. The other thing we can do is also use the powerful and precise functions of a database to help us detect problems, to detect bugs, to make sure data is consistent. For example, making sure that people are born on a date before their death date, which sounds funny, but that's something we often find are problems with the database. And we go in there and try to do some basic checking of data with Wikidata. That's something you cannot do with Wikipedia, but something you can do with a database. So we'll show you later on how we can actually display the knowledge graph of content and have you help improve Wikipedia and Wikidata simply by clicking on the different nodes there and discovering things that you can help fill in the blanks on. So this is a Wikidata query of what are themes depicted in her paintings. And something you can help out today with is to look at any paintings that have no depiction information and help us enter in things like lion, horse, dog, person to tell us what are in those paintings. And some really neat things can happen when we know that information. So those are the two tasks that we're going to be basically asking you to partake in. But don't worry, if you'd rather just help improve Wikipedia articles that you're more familiar with, that is absolutely something we encourage you to do as well. And Richard can talk a little bit about that in a second, about how we have those work lists for you. So I think that is it for now. Richard, do you want to talk a little bit about the other tasks that we have at the bottom of this diagram right here?
Yeah, I can share. So we have a couple of work lists. So we have a tool called MBabel for the Museum of Babel, which helps generate a new Wikipedia article based on Wikidata. So using some of the information loaded from the catalog and from users to start a brand new Wikipedia article on a particular artwork. We have exhaustive lists, of what we have on Wikidata for women artists in the Met, their individual artworks. We have sort of split up by time period, and we have some recommended ones here. So these are red links, and if you click on one, you can see an example of how you can start a draft article. And then you would just improve it. You would add sources. Everything links to the Met website for that artwork, and also you can find other sources. And it's a great way to create a draft and sort of not have to learn the wiki code if you're not as familiar with wiki code, or if you even just know the wiki code and you don't want to spend all the time doing it. It puts the image in a nice little box. If you want to click on one of those, we can give an example of one of those red links. Andrew, since you're sharing, you can click on. Any one of those.
You want to click on one of these red ones?
Yeah, click
okay.
on one of the links.
Let's go with the first one.
Yeah. So this is a memorial head from a particular African culture, and one of the nice things about this, one of the interesting things about this, is that it comes from a tradition that was dominated by women artists. So it's relevant for today. And if someone starts this article, probably it should be modified a bit. Probably shouldn't just be about this particular sculpture, but about the whole tradition. And that would be a great thing if someone wants to start that today. And you can start it, and then the red link will become blue, and then other people can edit it, and we can make a nice collaborative thing out of it. And I picked about, I think, 6 really interesting examples that are in the Met collection that don't have any article on Wikipedia, English Wikipedia yet. And you can create those today. And there are also some more exhaustive things in the longer list, which you kind of want to evaluate individually whether they're suitable for an article. This sculpture has some great documentation on it. I read a few articles. I've read a few like academic pieces about it. So there's definitely a lot to write about this sculpture. It sort of shows like the freedom of or the aspiration toward freedom of youth for girls in the early 20th century. So by roller skating, which was, I guess, new at the time.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a really cool feature that we now have working with the stuff that we just talked about, right? So if you look at the girl skating Wikidata item, this is Wikidata Live right here, we actually deal with what we call Q numbers, right? So you can imagine over time, there might be multiple artworks called girl skating. We certainly know that there's multiple ones like the Last Supper, right? There's not only Leonardo's Last Supper, but there's many, many Last Suppers. So we actually have a unique identifier for every item in Wikidata. So we don't have to worry about the same name over and over and over again, right? So this is what we call the Q number in Wikidata. And we'll be talking about that a lot. That's the basic unit of identification we're dealing with there. And then if you scroll down here, you can see that it's a sculpture, right? It is, here's the image for it. This is the inception or the creation date of that. The creator, which is here, and then it's made of bronze. Now, what's curious about Wikidata, which is great about Wikidata, is when you want to edit that, there's an edit button right there, right? So that's great. Instead of having to find the edit button, which you might have to do on Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia, it's at the top of the page. Sometimes you have to find that. In Wikidata, it's right where you want it. And when you edit that, it is not just free text. It is actually checking against all known entities in Wikidata. So sometimes we call this like editing on rails. It is a controlled vocabulary of things you can add here for the creator, which is good because it forces you to make sure that the artist is known to Wikidata, right? So that's something that I'm going to hit cancel. So we don't want to save that. But this is also one reason why Wikidata is often easier to edit, because it actually builds on the work that's already in Wikidata. So that when you enter things like made from material, it looks to see what are the materials that are commonly used for this field, and it'll bring in the right recommendations there, right? So that's really nice to see in Wikidata. And then when you edit this, you'll have the same thing if you've ever edited Wikipedia, of being able to look at the history to see every single change that's been made to that Wikidata item. Okay. And the reason why we want to show this is that it draws on this information to create this draft that Richard has helped us make here, right? So basically all this information that we saw in the Wikidata item is being pulled in to create the skeleton of the article. So if you're interested in just editing Wikipedia articles, absolutely feel free to do that. Let me show you two ways that we can do that. One is to go to the bottom of this list here and to actually go and click on the red link there, or you can go to these lists of artworks that we've created here and go ahead and create new articles by clicking on the red link there, and it'll open up the same type of template, right, Richard?
Yeah, you just want to be, probably paintings and sculptures would be more likely to be appropriate for Wikipedia articles, but you can experiment and see what's interesting. I also want to share the translations. So this will be relevant to anyone here who's multilingual. So this is a relatively easy way in. So obviously Wikipedia is in about 300 different languages. And we've made lists of all of the works by women artists that are in the Met collection that are in some language of Wikipedia, but not in yours. So if you want to click, a good example would be Spanish. If you click on the link for Spanish right there, that'd be a good example. Mm-hmm. It's that second link there.
This one here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you just, sorry, I got to fix that link. It's Wikidata : yeah, that's that one. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so these are all works that exist in at least one language of Wikipedia, but do not exist in the Spanish language. So if you click on that little language link there, excuse this interface because it's using something from a few years ago, but you pick which language you want to translate it from. So you probably want to pick a relatively close language. So in this case, maybe French, and you can start translation, and it lets you translate it to that target language.
Nice.
And it's a good way if you're looking for something that's already complete and you sort of just want to use your linguistic skills and put them to pure wiki work. It's a good way to do it. And we have not just for Spanish. I think I have a list for about 20 or so languages, and we can add other languages too. So if anyone has a request for languages, I guess maybe the quickest way to put that in the Wikimedia chat that we shared, chat.wikimuseum.org, or in the talk page of the English Wikipedia event article. But we have we have Armenian, we have Hungarian, we have Japanese, we have most of the languages there. And I fixed that particular link, but the top link has the link to all the languages there. The link just above the Spanish one.
Right.
Or unless I misformatted that one too. But in case I'll fix it.
I think it's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, we have such an international audience. If you are so moved, you can actually do translations, which is great. And these are all the pre-configured languages. But as Richard said, we could probably add more as we need to, right? So that's great.
Yeah, I could add on 2 minutes notice. Any language you want, I will edit. That's my commitment to you.
That's great. Excellent. So we actually have just a very basic introduction to some of the principles of editing Wikipedia. And I thought we'd just introduce them right here. They're very simple. We actually have entire help pages based on this content, but I thought it'd be nice to just show you some of the basics that really pervade all of the Wikimedia projects. And this is really interesting to know because you probably all are very much consumers of Wikipedia and Wikidata and all the content we have out there. But you might not have known there's actually a large set of policies out there that ensure what you're reading is actually pretty darn good content. So the most important thing here is what we call the NPOV, or the neutral point of view. So you ever notice that there are not 10 articles about conflicts in World War II? There's only one, and you get all these people to collaborate by agree to a neutral point of view, or to push and pull and to negotiate some kind of neutrality while editing Wikipedia. The other thing that makes Wikipedia and Wikidata work is that we're not looking for people's novel theories about how the universe works or how gravity works. We're looking for real citable, proven work that's out there. We're not looking for original research or theories here. And the key to that is using reliable sources. So you notice that at the bottom of Wikipedia articles are extensive footnotes and references to other places on the net to prove that what is in the article is actually backed by a source. So that's what we call our reliable sources policy, because that is what leads to V, or verifiability of content. So this is true whether you're editing a Wikidata item or Wikipedia article. We're looking for things that you can find references to and can be proven to be true in the sources that you're referring to. And then also what we're seeing as well in terms of whether you should even have a Wikipedia article or a Wikidata item is something called notability. So even though Wikipedia is gigantic with 6 million articles, there is a certain notability threshold that we have for Wikipedia articles. In general, you want to be covered by several sources. You're known for more than just one event, that you have a track record of being notable in the mainstream media or in scholarship. And then Wikidata has a much lower bar for notability. So we actually allow a lot more into Wikidata, including, as you saw, lots of artworks that may not merit an article by itself. So these are your basic 5 kind of principles that work across all the different projects out there. And again, we're not going to dwell too much on any one of them, but just know that when you add references and information to Wikipedia articles, you really do want to observe these things. And we're happy to take questions after these little 10-minute sprints to demo some of these things for you, to how to add references, to how to add more content. But we want to get you working quicker right out of the box. So anything else we need to tell folks, Richard, before we jump into the Wikidata workflows? I think that's a pretty good.
No, I think we should get going, move on.
Okay, great. So let's just show you very quickly what we have in store for you. And maybe we'll show you just one of these, and then we'll show the other one after our little sprint. So one of the things that we thought was interesting was we can give you a bunch of things to improve on Wikidata. One of the things you can do right now is just to go to this section of the Meetup page and say notable women artists of the Met. If you just want to look through them, you can actually click on the show button right here, and you can actually open up a list of notable women artists from Wikidata. So Jeannie, give us a little bit of a background in how we generate this list. These are women who have significant works at the Met. Is that right?
Yes. I think it was based on number of objects. And a lot of them are fashion designers. And I think there's a big, Andrew, you can probably talk more about it, but there's a big gap on Wikipedia and all the wiki platforms on fashion, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons we love having fashion edit-ons, and a lot of these women are fashion designers. So that's how this list was generated. But you know, it might not. If you're looking for a particular artist, feel free to go to that artist record. This is just, I think this one's based on object count in the collection.
Right. That's right. So these are object counts, or we might have pulled in from folks like Edmonia Lewis, or very notable works, right, in the collection. And there's two different ways that we're kind of recommending folks interact with this. One is you can just go directly into the item, right? So if you're like, oh, I actually know quite a bit about Lucia Prada, and you can actually just go and open the Wikipedia article like that. So this is her information here. And then what you might not have seen before, it's kind of hiding in plain sight, is to get to the Wikidata item is Wikidata right there. It's hidden in a sea of links, which there's no easy way to fix that, but you just have to know to look for it there. If you want to get to the Wikidata item, it's right here on the left-hand side. And if you click on that, you will see that there's the Wikidata item. And so one of the things that you could easily do is just to make sure that everything you read in the Wikipedia article about where she was born, about where she studied, this is a big one. Like, we actually don't have a lot of great information about folks in Wikidata sometimes about where they went to school. So you want to go over to the Wikidata item and perhaps go through here and make sure that all the information that's in Wikipedia, which is 20 years old, is in Wikidata, which is fairly young. You know, it's been around for less than 10 years. So we're still moving a lot of information, and we may not have everything in here. So things like occupation, employer, educated at. Fortunately, we do have University of Milan here, but you might want to make sure that all the information we have in the Wikipedia article is in fact in the Wikidata article. So that's kind of working on a person per person basis. Another thing you can do is actually to go through and look at whole swaths of people. So we have this tool called Tabernacle. And if you go in here, you can actually bring up an entire table of all the artists that we have here. So this is a really nice way to work, because it actually highlights work that you could do very quickly in red. So you could actually go in here, and this is a table that kind of looks like a spreadsheet, but you can actually just double click in here and start editing, right? So if you can go in here, and let's say we're going to take her name here, Emily Petway, and we don't have a French label. So I can go ahead and just go in there and go ahead and paste it in there. It's saved. And I'm actually editing Wikidata live in this table format like that, which is pretty cool, right? So the red boxes are asking you for contributions. It's saying, hey, we don't have a description of Mertline Perkins in French, and hopefully you can translate African-American artist, or you even copy it from another entry there. So that's work you can immediately do. Or you can help us fill in other things, like they're a student of another person. Where were they educated? What movement are they known for in the artistic sense? These are all things you can add directly here, or just go straight to the entry and enter them right here. So again, if you have any questions, we're going to just do a 10-minute sprint of editing, and we can always come back and show you more things during that time when we evaluate the work that's out there. Okay, so you can use Tabernacle or go directly into those things to do that. And then the last thing I'll show you before we get some work done is this tool, which is kind of neat. So this is a tool called Knowledge Grapher, and this actually shows you kind of all the works by an artist. So this gives you another way to look at what work is out there that you could engage with. So I'm going to start with a modest one first. I'm going to say, visualize all works by Edmonia Lewis. So you can go in here and see, this gives you a cool graph of what we have in Wikidata. And this is nice. You can actually drag these around on your screen. You can actually do all kinds of neat things with this. And the nice thing about this, it shows you right away in yellow what is depicted in that artwork. So you can see that Minnehaha here depicts not only the historical figure here, but a woman, headdress, necklace, things like that. And you can see all the different themes that Edmonia Lewis had in her sculpture. But what's really jumping out at you is that we don't have any metadata about what's depicted in this. So this would be ripe for contribution right here. So you can actually double click on this here. Oops, if it jumps back here in a second. I'm going to have to go to this one. Okay, so go here, it's forever free. And you can see that we don't have tons of information for her, for this right here. We can actually say add a statement, and we can say depicts. That's the way that we add depiction information there. And if we go look at this can see that it is got a chain. It's slavery, which is one of the themes there. But let's just go ahead and type in chain like that. And you can see that it's not a retail chain. It's a chain right here. And again, this is the controlled vocabulary Wikidata. Choose that one and hit publish. And we've now added useful information to Wikidata. That's it. That's really cool, right? So we encourage you to try that as well, as you can work with the graphs that we have already here, add information there. You can even go to all of Rosa Bonner's works there, or you can go to Knowledge Grapher itself, which is a little tool, and just enter in the Q number of any artist that you're interested in. You can go and look at Mary Cassatt, which I encourage you to avoid right now because it's really big, but you can actually go and look at other graphs like this. And just to browse them is just really interesting. If you just peruse it and to find out what you can do here, it's really fascinating to see the stuff that we have in Wikidata and what you can do next. So what are some of the tasks we can do here? You can see that all these things with Q numbers here are ones that we don't have a label for yet in English. And that's something you can do right away, is go to the item and help us put a label in right there, right? How do you do that? Well, you go down here and you can go and look at the URL of the object at the museum and help bring in the labels that they have. Okay, yes. Okay, so, this one we might not have right away, but we can go in and look for this item in the museum and then find out what its actual label is, or we can go in and see what it is in other languages. Like here's the Dutch name, so we can bring that in and make it the English label. So this is just showing you how this gives you a whole bunch of different things you can do here. And don't worry if you don't understand everything right away. We can explain it if folks want to see more of this. But the idea here is that these are the artworks. These tell you what kind of artwork it is. And these tell you in yellow the theme or the depicted information that's in there. So you can start to see that Rosa here really loved painting animals, which is in fact her area of strength here, right? All right, so that's all we want to show you for now, and we can always show you more later on in the editathon. But this is a really novel and different way to improve the content for Wikidata and Wikipedia in ways that maybe you didn't know about before. So any other comments from Jeannie or other folks about how we might start editing this?
And if you want to, I don't know if you can go back to the knowledge graph and show it in a different language, just to show the power of the translated content on Wikidata.
That's a great point. So one of the powers of Wikidata is that I happen to be looking at this in English, right? So I'm saying, oh, that's a lamb, that's a sketch, that's a study. But the power of Wikidata is that it's automatically useful in many languages at the same time. Oh yeah, thank you for saying that's the largest knowledge graph you've seen. This is not big compared to some things we can show you later on. So I have a pretty powerful computer, so we might be able to show you some really big ones later on, which are really interesting. So as Jeannie said, we can actually go in here and say, this is the code, which you don't have to know about to make this, but I can actually set this language, let's say to Spanish. So now when I run this, notice, hopefully, all these different terms are now in Spanish, right? So it is pretty fascinating that all the depiction information, all the types of artworks are all now in Spanish. And we have the, how many languages do we have now, Richard? Like 300 languages that you can choose from up here, right? So you can choose whatever you want up here, in even some languages I don't even know how to select, but there's tons of languages just to choose up here, and the interface will change to reflect those languages. So that's another benefit of Wikidata, is you don't have to wait for someone to translate all these things. It kind of comes for free in Wikidata. And
also, Andrew, one of the benefits of Wikidata is the internet search engines and voice assistants are constantly pulling Wikidata, and they actually use them in their own search results. And Andrew and I did some experiments last year. We created a Wikidata item and a Wikipedia article on a newly acquired work in the Met's collection, and it came up in Google, like, I don't know, within an hour. So it's such a powerful tool for us at the museum to extend the reach of our collection, especially in translated languages. So we're working so hard to get more of our content onto Wikidata.
Right. right? So yeah, that's something that, as Jeannie said, we've done experiments where an hour is typical. Sometimes we've seen it in less than 10 minutes. You add something to Wikidata and Wikipedia, and boom, it's available in Google within 10 minutes. And what's fascinating is if you go to your iPhone, everyone knows that you can kind of do Siri search on your iPhone. You just start typing in the artwork. We've seen it show up within 30 minutes or so on your iPhone, because it's been ingested by Apple and put available on all iPhones, which is pretty fascinating if you think about that. So yeah, we see some great comments here saying Wikimedia projects are very helpful tool for foreign language learning. That's absolutely true. It's really fascinating to see all that. And we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can do with multilingual content. So what I thought we could do, and you'll see the little timer in the upper left-hand corner, give you folks some time to play with the things that you see on the screen, and including looking through either Tabernacle. So I'd recommend either looking at Tabernacle here while logged in. And the first time you run this, it might have you need to log in notification in the upper right-hand corner. So I encourage you to do that. And just peruse this and kind of see how this all works. The other thing you can do is to scan this list of women artists here to see what might float your boat in terms of whether you're interested in fashion designers. And as Jeannie said, we absolutely love contributions in the area of fashion design. Look at how much information is missing for fashion designers here. And they absolutely are really valuable things to have in Wikipedia and Wikidata. And then the third way is to go and use the knowledge graph, as I mentioned, right? So you can actually go down and try looking at the knowledge graph here. Click on Rosa, click on Edmonia Lewis, go ahead and enter in the Q number of any artist that you're interested in and look at the knowledge graph and start working there. So I know that this is a little bit overwhelming, but that's why we're giving you 10 minutes to browse around. We'll also kind of show you things on the screen, but I know that for folks who might be distracted by people talking while they're trying to work, you can mute because you can see that little timer in the upper left-hand corner, hopefully count down. And you'll know when to come back and unmute yourself and to come back to listen to us. So we're going to leave it there and have you folks try poking around and try editing something. Just try one edit. And I think the easiest thing might be to go to an artwork and just enter in a depiction statement. That's one of the easiest things you can do. Go to your favorite artwork in Wikidata and then see if you can add something about depictions, which we're still very, very low on in terms of information. Some very famous paintings we have a lot of depiction information for, but most we have very little or no depiction information about, right? So we've started our 10-minute timer. Go ahead and try out either looking at Wikidata items. Of course, you're always welcome to go down and start editing Wikipedia articles themselves by creating them, or going into the lists and editing them by just clicking on the article itself like that. But I encourage you to try the Wikidata because it's actually a very low barrier to contribution. It's quite simple to do. And I will show you some work on the screen here while you can also be working there. But because we know that some people might be distracted by our voices and the sounds we're making, you can mute if you want and just look at the timer and work on your stuff. And we'll reconvene here at in about 8 minutes or so after you had time to poke around. If that sounds good, then let's get working and compare notes and send us in the chat and your comments things that you've been working on, either individual items or Wikipedia articles that you're working on. We'd love to see what you're working on, even though we can kind of look at the dashboard and get some of that information. We'd love for you to share either interesting things you found or things that you've improved or things you've noted while looking through those areas.
Andrew, there are a couple of questions in a chat. Is the MediaWiki account different from the Wikipedia account?
Yeah, good question. Richard, you want to answer that? Yeah, we have the same account for Wikipedia and Wikidata and Wikimedia Commons. So, you know, we just use the same account for all those. And if you want to, you know, asking if we were talking about editing Wikipedia, I don't know if we'll have a lot of detail about that, but we will have some. And you're certainly welcome to do that. If you want some individualized help with that, you can go to the chat and people will help you out there. There are a lot of people there who are very knowledgeable about editing Wikipedia. I don't know if you want to we want to introduce some of our other guests? We have actually a few other guests. Andrew, you're
muted, Andrew.
Sorry about that. I thought what we could do is let's do the sprint first, because I don't want anyone who's working to miss out on our wonderful guests. So what we can do is the first thing we do when we get back from the sprint is to introduce our guests, if that works for you, Richard. And then what we can do in this kind of working time is to answer questions on screen and to show basic Wikipedia editing, knowing that hopefully a lot of folks are tuning us out because they're doing great work and working on Wikidata or Wikipedia. So if that works, we can answer some of the questions on screen in sequence, knowing that the timer in the upper left-hand corner shows that people can keep working for another 6 minutes while we go over some basics here. So I think maybe what we can do very quickly is to answer this question, Richard, is how to edit an actual article. So maybe I'll bring it up and maybe you can narrate some of the stuff that, what it takes to edit a Wikipedia article, right? So the most important thing is make sure you're logged in. That's the thing that we encourage people to do. We actually have two different ways of editing articles. One is the source editor and one is the visual editor. We highly recommend people do the visual editor. It may be, and Richard, maybe you know better than I do, it may be that you get pumped into the text editor like this, but if you want to move between them, you can go to the pencil icon and go to visual editing. And that's by the easiest way to get into the visual editor mode.
Obviously, one of the easiest things you can do is to add a fact, or to correct a fact, or to add a sentence or to mention, where this artist's work was shown, maybe where they went to school, maybe who they taught, and to add references. So often there will be, references either from a museum or from a different publication, from a newspaper or magazine. So if you can add one fact to one of these artists' articles, that would be a very valuable contribution for Wikipedia today. That's
right. That's a great point. So this is one I singled out before, Yoli Tang. She's doesn't have that much information, even though she made it into one of the more significant women artists that we have at the Met. So one of the things that if you're scanning down here, you could do some very basic things, such as just add wiki links. So let's go into the visual editing mode. Again, if you're not in the right mode, you can always go to visual editing right there. And just show you some basic stuff about how to link to stuff. So let's say we have not linked to New York City before. So what we could do is say, let's make a wiki link from New York City. So I selected New York City and I can say, hit the link there, and it'll try to find the matches in Wikipedia right there. So I can choose New York City, and then you can see right there, it is now linking to New York City. So let's just say that's the one change you want to make. You click on publish changes. And then we really like for people to add an edit summary here, right? So Richard, give us some advice on what we should put here.
I'm sorry. What change did you make?
Don't worry. Just say added wiki link to,
yeah.
Say New York City, or just say NYC, right?
I'm trying to keep up with the chat.
Okay, no worries. So this just gives other people an indication the fact that you added something here, right? So there it is. New York City now is live. And we encourage people also to look at the history of the article. So right up here, you can say view history, and you'll hopefully will see your edition, or my edition, which is right there. And this is why it's important to add a edit summary, is that without even having to inspect the page, I can very quickly see what has been changed. So this is just kind of being a nice citizen in Wikipedia. And you can see that hopefully other people have added useful things. Yes, okay, this person said, I removed 2 links. This person said added press coverage. So this is just, people talking to people while editing about what has happened to the article. All right. The other thing you might want to know about is the talk page. So this is meant for human reading, but if you want to discuss with other editors saying, hey, you know what, I think she graduated this year and not that year, you could go to the talk page and ask a question of folks and see what has been discussed. Her article is fairly new, so it's not going to have a lot of discussion, but what you could do is say, new section, and say question about at school. And you can ask a question here and say, when did she go to school? Right, so like that. And the way that we sign our comments is kind of arcane in Wikipedia, but we put in 4 squiggles or 4 tildes like that, and that signs your name on the talk page. This is what we call wiki markup. And unfortunately, this, you still need to know some of this older wiki markup to do discussions, but it's not too hard. It's just typing in there. If you hit the show preview button, which I encourage you to do, you can kind of see what it'll look like. It'll post a question and it'll sign your name at the end there. And that's just the basics of talk pages on Wikipedia. And we highly encourage you to engage in dialogue if there's some contention or some unknowns that you want to talk to other folks about. Okay. The only other thing I can think of right now that's easy to do is to show you how to put in a reference. So let's see if we have any information about Yoli Teng that we can find on, let's say, Google News. This is typically what a Wikipedia editor might do, is to go through here and find out. This is interesting. Look, she's teaming up with Richard Serra at the Phoenix Art Museum. So this might be an interesting news tidbit that we want to put in. All right, so I'm not sure if this is new or old information, but just let me show you how we put in a reference. So I will copy the URL, right, the web address of that article. So let me see if Sarah is mentioned in here. Aha, there it is. So there is that information right there. There's nothing in the prose, right? So you could write in something that is longer. So let me just show you what that might look like. I might hit the edit button here and say something like this. I'm going to start typing in here and say, she had a show with... Not saying this is beautiful prose. I'm just saying this is an example of what I might in here. And then the key here is that we don't like claims like this without any references. So what I can do is go in here, say cite, right? So I hit the cite button here, and I can paste in the URL I just had and hit generate. And hopefully some magic will happen here. It's going to go to the website, grab the information. And this is pretty good. So you can see it's, Jeannie, I think this is Women's Wear Daily, right? WWD is probably what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
And then you can see that it grabbed the title. Oh, we are down to our last second there. So I'm going to pause that for a second. We are seeing that it grabbed the author, but it kind of got it wrong. It doubled it there, but that's okay. Most everything else is okay there. I can go ahead and hit insert. And there I am. I've inserted a reference for that claim. The nice thing is, even if it's not perfect, I can go in here and hit edit. And I can actually just go in and delete that replicated name. You know, most of the time, scraping that information works out well. Sometimes there's some errors. It's okay. You can clean it up right there. Hit apply changes. And there we are, a well-formed reference for a new chunk of information we've added to the Wikipedia article. All right. And then if I spent more time, I would say that's a really good sentence. I hit publish changes, but I just wanted to show you what that looks like. Hopefully, when you scroll down to the bottom, you will see right down here, there's the reference I added in number 13 right there. So those are kind of the main skills to edit Wikipedia articles, the visual editor and adding references for any words that you write in there. Okay, hopefully that was useful to folks who are editing Wikipedia for the first time. All right. Someone said, hate technology here for the art presentation. No worries. We'll talk about art. Don't worry in a second. Hopefully you can see that we're using technology and art together to do some interesting things, but no worries. We're doing little 10-minute sprints, hopefully to clarify anything that people have questions about along the way. So we're back here to the planning page, and we've done our 10-minute sprint. So hopefully folks have done some interesting things, or feel free to tell us things that were interesting, might have been confusing, things we can clarify. We just showed you roughly how to do some basic Wikipedia article editing. We can show you some more things about Wikidata in a second, but we wanted to introduce you to one of our veteran Wikipedia and Wikidata editors, Jane Darnell. Hello, Jane. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I was active on the chat. It's hard to keep up with you guys.
Yeah, no worries. But Jane, I thought you could tell us a little bit about yourself, because you have been highly prolific in a lot of the art-oriented editing initiatives that we have in the Wikipedia and Wikidata field. And specifically, you've been working with not just online resources to improve Wikipedia and Wikidata, but you're going to print catalogs, things that may not have been digitized yet. And if you work only with online sources, you might be missing a lot of stuff. So you're doing the hard work of going to older Met catalogs or older art catalogs to get information there to help improve content about, let's say, women artists that have been left behind in history. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what your area of work is, and how some of that is giving you better understanding of these artists and the artworks.
Sure. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to plug my work, because I'm always looking for people who are interested in doing other artists. As you can see, it's all dark here. I've got the lights on. I live in the Netherlands, so 6 hours ahead of you. And I got interested in my local museum. And so I am now sort of expert in the artists that came from the town of Haarlem. And that started with work on Frans Hals. And Frans Hals was the first artist that I fully indexed according to his most known biographers, Klaus Grimm and Seymour Slive. And since then, I've sort of graduated to other Dutch artists. And during lockdown, I've been active working on El Greco, which is completely out of my comfort zone, because I think there isn't even an El Greco in the Netherlands. So our National Library, which is my normal go-to place for sources, is completely useless. And I have noticed that there are a lot of El Grecos stashed all over in the United States, and I had no idea about it. And he's one of the artists that has quite a few forgeries and quite a few lost paintings. And so it's been an interesting journey to untangle the El Greco paintings that have been documented in various language Wikipedias. And as I was discussing before, I was astonished to find out that there's some fan on Polish Wikipedia that has been systematically putting in articles about every single painting they could find by El Greco. And I think that's what I think is so fascinating about Wikipedia, is that we often think of Wikipedia as being this monolithic beast, right? You were talking about the 6 million articles. That only is on English Wikipedia, right? There are so many more Wikipedias that are so much smaller. And Polish is way smaller. So it's just really weird that they would have a lot more extensive information on El Greco than the English Wikipedia. I find that kind of thing fascinating. And I love finding these pockets of expertise locked into all these different languages. There's been a lot of work in recent years on the early icons of El Greco when he was still really in Greece, right? El Greco just means the Greek. And it's fascinating because a lot of them are actually still in situ in these little chapels. You know, Greece is just a country of islands. I find it fascinating. And I think it's interesting because that information is completely inaccessible to me. I mean, I can barely parse the Greek letters, right? Much less try to figure out what's being said about a particular icon. And icons are not my realm of expertise. But that said, I do think that catalogs are important. And I think it's important to track down for every notable artist the cataloger who is behind that artist, right? So in the case of El Greco, he's one of these painters, a lot like Frans Hals, which is maybe why I latched onto him, that he was rediscovered by the Impressionists. There's something about his work. If you actually look up one of his paintings, one of his more glorious tall paintings. Actually, the Met has a great painting. It's been cut down, but it's just the lower half. It's called the Fifth Seal, opening the Fifth Seal, or the Vision of St. John. And the colors are amazing. And the brushwork is amazing. And it's fascinating because you realize, he really does seem very impressionistic. When they talk about Frans Hals being impressionistic, they really mean about how, he got impatient with doing all the lace and it was all sort of scratchy and quickly done. But when it comes to El Greco, I mean, he's just way out there in Neverland. You realize, okay, this is like completely off the charts. Everyone's saying, oh, he was so heavily influenced by Titian, that little self-portrait by the Met that's on his Wikipedia page. It looks a little bit like Titian. It's sort of Titian-esque. And then you look at these tall paintings, you're like, whoa, what is this guy? And I think that's so much fun, is that you don't know where your journey is going to take you when you start in on one of these catalogs. You're just sort of plugging away number after number. But while you're going, I mean, they often are produced, these monographs are produced in chronological order. So you start off with the early works, which tend to be very, very standard, right? They tend to be, these are the A students who are following the the works of the day. I mean, if you look at Picasso's early blue period, this is his younger period, right? It looks more like, the kind of realistic paintings. And then it slowly gets more and more abstract. And that was true of Frans Hals, and it's equally true of El Greco. And so what I also like about catalogs is that it's very easy on Wikidata to get hooked in. You drop down the rabbit hole and you don't come out, right? It'd be like weeks later and you're like, where was I? What happened? Is it Saturday already? How did that happen? Well, that can't happen to you when you're on a catalog, because a catalog is always finite, especially exhibition catalogs. I mean, what is an exhibition these days? Maybe top 20 works. I mean, nobody can afford it at first of all. I mean, if you're talking about the last really, really big Frans Hals exhibition, I think it was about 120 works, and it was back in before World War II, and back in the 1930s. Since 1950, nobody could afford to have that many Frans Hals under one roof. And, people might get scared that, you couldn't insure that even. And you look at something like the recent El Greco exhibitions in 2014, I don't think any one of them was more than actually 10 works by El Greco himself. And the rest were all these, works by people in his orbit or in people who were considered to be his patrons. And you do need that extra stuff to sort of support your understanding of the artist.
Thanks, Jane. I think one of the things that you've done a lot of good work within the catalogs, and one thing that maybe perhaps you could share today is looking at the catalogs and how women artists have been attributed and misattributed over time, and how that's covered on Wikidata and how it's covered in traditional museum catalogs.
Well, women artists have been misattributed for, the earliest ones. I think the most notable misattributed artist that's now been, unfortunately during lockdown, but she had a great show at the National Gallery in London last year. That was Artemisia Gentileschi. I think 100% of her works were misattributed until very recently, like 20 years ago or something. Wow. And the other one that I could think of, which just a couple of years ago, was Michelina Wautier, whose works were considered to be by somebody else. Maybe her work was considered to be Artemisia's work. So Artemisia was being represented with this work of another woman artist. I mean, it's crazy. And I think that's fascinating that that happens. You wonder why it happens. But, going back to Frans Hals, Judith Leister was his pupil. She was documented as his pupil. Virtually all of her works were attributed to Frans Hals as soon as she died. So it was very quick. Even though there were engravings after her paintings, the engravings actually said, and this is in her lifetime, they actually said Frans Hals. And it does make you wonder, like, oh, maybe there's more going on that we don't know. Maybe there, it wasn't just a question of erasing these women willfully. People knew who painted what. I mean, it was quite a production to produce a painting. So you have to sort of untangle what were the chains of ownership and what was the message that a painting brought. And I think it was, historically the case that if you could prove something was a big ticket item, then it was going to bring more money than if it was by a pupil, right? We know this from all the work on Rembrandt. But what I find interesting about Judith Leister in particular is that she never left Haarlem, but neither did Frans Hals. So it's very obvious. It's always been obvious what the works are. And it's just so interesting to me that she could get so 100% misattributed so quickly and stay that way for centuries until somebody actually started studying her signature, which seems crazy. But then we forget that all these paintings were covered in a great big thick layer of nicotine. The Dutch loved their white, clay pipes, and they were smoking constantly wherever these paintings were hanging. And we keep forgetting that nothing was cleaned until the Impressionists. Impressionists started making money. They bought the paintings. Frans Hals was a painter's painter, so was El Greco, and it was the painters who actually dared to start cleaning off the surface, which everybody thought was awful. And now, you sometimes you will look at these Sotheby's these Sotheby's records, and they'll actually say something like, oh, it's been badly abraded. Well, what they mean by that is that somebody cleaned it a little too overzealously. But of course, nobody knew how to clean this stuff. So they were just like putting on soap, right? It took them a while to figure out. It's like you can clean this stuff without damaging the paint.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I want to bring in Kira. So I want if Kira, you can introduce yourself. Kira is the head of our Art and Feminism project, which has been so successful in engaging volunteers and improving areas and what Jane was just talking about. So Kira, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do with Art and Feminism.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me, and thanks for this great programming today. It's great to hear about your work too, Jane. So my name is Kira Wisniewski. My pronouns are she, her, and I have the honor and privilege of being the executive director of Art and Feminism. So Art and Feminism is a global campaign that really works on doing exactly this, like mobilizing editors from around the world to help address these knowledge gaps. And like kind of just building on what Jane is talking about too. It's just even thinking about before we even get to Wiki, right? Just like where these imbalances are in the art world. Cis and trans women, non-binary folks, the BIPOC communities are also underrepresented in the art world. So kind of also relating to some of the stats that were talked about earlier in the program about the Met itself, like a data analysis of 18 major US art museums found that the collections are 87% male and 85% white. Over 60% of MFA students are women, but galleries only show 30% women artists. So there are a lot of these deficits and imbalances that exist in the art world before we even get to Wiki. So the work that you all are helping do today just really helps us. And so what is on the screen right now is our website that we actually relaunched in December that we're pretty excited about. And you can find out a lot of information about the work that we do, look up resources. We really create our guides and our tutorials with like a feminist pedagogy and the beginner in mind. So there's a lot of different resources there. And then you can also check out our events listing. So not just events, if you like what you're seeing today, there's events happening around the world that you can attend and hopefully, just get more involved. Everybody should edit Wikipedia, and we hope that you join in this work.
Andrew, you're muted.
Andrew.
Sorry, I was about to say you had a lot of events at museums. That was one of your major things that you got. Dozens of folks who'd never edited Wikipedia before. How have you been doing with the pandemic, and how have you adjusted for that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we did as an organization is back in November, we issued a community care statement because we recognize where we are in a pandemic, and also just in a lot of in a racial awakening that is happening throughout this country particularly, and out throughout the world. And so we recognize that a lot of people in our communities might not have as much capacity for more on-screen work. And then also just with the pandemic, we're asking our organizers to think about what's safest for their communities. Even though a museum might be open, is it safe for the security staff to be there? Is it safe for perhaps attendees that might be elderly or immune compromised to attend an event? And so with that in mind, we created a virtual guide on helping organizers thinking about pivoting to a virtual event such as this. We also have a couple screen captures of walking behind some behind the scene tools of some platforms that folks might consider. So for instance, Richard and I actually did a screen capture of using StreamYard, the platform that we're using right now, to perhaps consider doing an edit-a-thon. And we also offer microfunding through Art and Feminism as well. So if you need a couple $100s to pay for StreamYard or Zoom or whatever kind of other platform that you want to do your digital event for, Art and Feminism can help with that. And overall, I would say the numbers as expected are lower, which is fine and expected, and we're glad that communities are taking care of themselves. But at the same time, we've been pleasantly surprised by the numbers. We actually prepared a communication that went out last week highlighting some of the global events, and at that point, we had 88 events on our dashboard. And I'm looking at it right now, and now there are 103. So just in the past week, there's been several more events that have been put on the dashboard, and they're being organized. And we're really excited to be able to celebrate all this work.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're seeing the same thing. Like we would normally have maybe 50 or so at a in-person edit-a-thon, but we can reach folks all over the world now virtually. So it's been really fascinating to see. So thank you so much. And this is a great opportunity for a lot of us to reach an audience that we never had before. So we had some questions in the comments. Some are related to the editing we're doing. Some are related to maybe some general observations about Wiki. You're welcome to stay and chime in, any of the folks here. One that was commonly asked, which is valid, is how do you add images to Wikidata? So let me show you how that works really fast, because it's easy if you know how it works, but it can be a little bit confusing if you've never done it before. So this is a good example of what I actually did the other day. Normally, because Wikipedia is older, Wikipedia articles get updated faster in many ways than the Wikidata items. So if you look at, let's say, the entry in Wikidata for Yoli Tang here, you'll notice that she may not have an image here, right? So there's all this nice information, but she doesn't have an image. But someone might have uploaded one to Wikimedia Commons, which is where we store our photos, and then added it to Wikipedia, but didn't know to add it to Wikidata. So here's how you might do it. If it's already in Commons, you can go ahead and click on her image here, let's say. So it's a little bit confusing because you're looking at her image in Wikipedia right there, but it's actually in Wikimedia Commons. So you go here and you can click on this just to make sure it is in Wikimedia Commons, and there she is. There's her portrait. So you can actually go ahead and copy that name right there. And then when you go to her entry here, this is one of the unfortunate things here is if you want to add a statement, you have to kind of scroll down to the bottom until it says add statement right there. Then I can click on that and choose image. Okay, so yeah, for better or for worse, it's not picture, it's image. So you choose image, and we actually have different things you can add. You can actually add like a 360 image or whatever, but this is the most common thing. You choose image, and then what you can do is just paste in that name that you had. Hopefully it will show up correctly like that. So again, this has to have been uploaded to Wikimedia Commons, first of all, to be there. And then you can click on her name and hit publish. And then now that picture will be attached to this Wikidata item. Now, if you want to know how to upload to Commons, you can actually go in here and choose upload file right there. Right. So when you choose the upload file there, you can actually upload files here. Now, Wikimedia Commons in itself is a whole nother ball of wax in terms of copyright, and is it free? Is it public domain? Is there freedom of panorama for folks who are in Europe? This can get complex. So that's why it's kind of a second level edit-a-thon where we talk about images on Commons. But the Met and other organizations have uploaded tons and tons of artworks and things like that. So if you can find it in Commons, it's fair game. If it's not in Commons already, there's a little bit of work to make sure it's under a free license to upload here. So I think we'll just kind of leave it there for now. But if you can find the image in Commons, you know, search for the person's name there. And oftentimes there will be an image there, but has not been added to Wikidata yet. All right. So hopefully that answered that question, Lila. That's a good question, but it's not always obvious how to do that. All right. Any other questions that we see from the chat? We'd also love for you to send us any links to images or to Wikidata items you've either improved or you found interesting. If not, we can enter another 10-minute sprint, and maybe I can edit with Jane and Richard and Jeannie some things while we do that 10-minute sprint. Kira, absolutely, you're welcome to join, although I know you have another deadline that you need to be at. But we can kind of show you some of the things that Wikipedia and Wikidata editors do while answering your questions while we do another 10-minute sprint. So let me get that working here and share that on the screen there. All right, so we're going to enter another 10-minute sprint where we really want you to try some of the tasks that we've set up for you here. And if you are bothered by the audio, you can mute and come back in 9 minutes, and we can kind of re-engage and see what things you've done there.
Andrew, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I went ahead and was bold, and I clicked on one of Richard's links.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second one down.
This one?
No, the woman reading.
Yeah.
Oh, the third one. Okay.
Yeah. And so I published it as a draft, but I don't know. I have no idea what to do with the draft space.
Yeah. So I guess so the thing about the Embabble tool is it creates, and I guess we can get Giovanna can join perhaps soon, also as work.
Yeah, we'll join her in a second. Yeah.
Is that it creates certain a very basic thing with one source from the Met website in this case, but ideally you could add a couple more sources that you could find and then just publish it yourself. The drafting is sort of nominal. It's especially for someone who knows more about it. But yeah, just if people want to put in 2 or 3 more sources and publish it, that would be great.
Yeah, I was looking at the Met page for her, but there besides the donor and the fact that it was donated in 1995, it sort of stops there. I can't see that it's actually used in any other project, but it seems to be an important portrait because it's a female artist, and then it's her sister. So it's a family member. It's a portrait of a family member. So it seems like it would be.
That would be an interesting thing to just put, I guess, there's some description of it on the Met website, Met Collections website. So maybe put some of the context about, who was painted and under what circumstances. That might be useful. And this seems like the kind of work that if they wrote a little bit about it on the Met website, there's probably more written about it in other places.
Yeah, at the very least, I suppose what I could do now is at least check that it's linked to her sister's Wikidata item, if her sister has an item. But I guess her sister is notable because she was married to an important painter. So that gives the 1 degree of notability, right, on Wikidata. So she's related to 2 notable Wikidata items.
Andrew, there was a question in the chat about DPI requirements for images. Is there one for Commons?
That is a great question. Obviously, the higher the DPI, the better for us. We love high DPI images. On the other hand, we're willing to take what we can get, right, Jane? Like we'd rather there be a low resolution version of something than nothing. And obviously, we want to keep going up if we can. Though sometimes that's not always the case. It's not always possible.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to El Greco, a lot of his works were destroyed during the Spanish Civil War and then again during the Second World War. So we have some really grainy, horrible old photographs from, the 1930s. Sure, we'll take that because you want to be able to present the entire oeuvre, right? So yeah, we'll take what we can get. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have explained DPI means dots per inch. So it's talking about the resolution of images that we're uploading to Wikimedia Commons. And
obviously for background here, we're primarily dealing with public domain artworks. So older artworks, early 20th century or before that are in the public domain. And the Met we've uploaded the images to Commons of the works that are considered to be in the public domain. It depends a lot on the institution and on the artist, and there are a lot of specialties, a lot of particularizations involved. But part of the focus is about adding images from Wikimedia Commons, like Maria just did.
Yeah, welcome, Maria.
Yeah, congratulations.
See our friends with Met veterans here. That's great. Yes, some people are talking about adding book subjects. That's a great question. One of the neat things about the citation tool that we have in Wikipedia is that if you actually find something in Google Books and you grab the URL of where you found it in Google Books and paste it into the citation tool that we have, it does a really nicely formatted citation, and also with well-known like library sites like OCLC and places like that. So for books, we do a pretty good job of citing it because the well-known databases out there we can get the data from. But for all these random news sites and Women's Wear Daily and everything, it's tougher to get the perfect citation out there. Yeah. So yeah, so some folks saying they're trying to cite books and things like that, that can be done nicely sometimes, but for news sources, tougher. Okay. So Richard, you had a question here.
Okay, yeah. How can you get on the Glam Wiki list? So I'm not sure which you mean, but I can get in touch with you. So we have mailing lists. We have a bunch of mailing lists. We also have talk page lists. So you might have been on the New York mailing list or the New York talk page list. So you can add to that. A lot of different regions have their own lists, but there are certainly there are mailing lists and there are chat functions for Wikimeet, different aspects of the Wikimedia universe. There's a newsletter which might be the quickest way to get updated every month. It's called the Glam Wiki newsletter, so you might want to check that out. And you can also contribute to it. It's an open newsletter, so if you're doing any project and you want to share it, you can share it in your country's report.
I guess we used to have a mailing list. It's sort of I've even forgotten the name of it. But it sort of has gone into sleep mode with the use of social media, a lot more Facebook and Twitter.
Right. So let's go back to our task list here quickly. So again, people keep working. Don't feel like you need to listen to us. We'd love for you to keep doing some more work there, experiment with some stuff. So we do have this knowledge grapher tool. We also have another tool, which is kind of interesting, called the Wiki Art Depiction Explorer. So I thought I'd just show you this real quick as another way to contribute, which is, the nice thing about Wikidata is it's a database, but we can have different interfaces on top to edit that. So this one is kind of interesting that you can actually bring up this tool with an individual painting, and you can see that if you put in the Q number into this tool, this is called the Wiki Art Depiction Explorer, it'll pull all this information that you find in Wikidata, which is pretty interesting. But you can also kind of, in a much easier way, add the depiction information here. So can we find something in this painting we have not added a depiction statement for yet? Oh. Obviously, horses are in this painting.
I got the
hospital. Go ahead.
I worked on this. So I worked on this Wikidata, and I was very proud of it because I made it very complete.
Very complete.
I'm not sure there are extra ones. I added a particular breed of horse. I added the hospital, which it's on the grounds of, which had an article on French Wikipedia, but not on English Wikipedia.
Right.
So I was particularly proud of this one, and it was nice to be able to place it in a geographic context from whatever probably French Wikipedians who added the article on the former hospital in Paris. Right. The grounds of it. Actually, there's a whole series of horse markets and this was just one of like 3 or 4 in the same location or similar locations. And I learned a lot about reading my very basic French. I learned about it in French Wikipedia.
I mean, sometimes you need to go really close, right, to see more detail because otherwise it's too small, right? Believe it or not, Richard, I added tree because there was no tree.
Oh, yeah. There are those blue costumes that they're wearing. I'm not sure what that signifies. It might be useful there.
Right, or back here. There's some more detail back there. There's a fence. There's a fence back there. All right, so I'm going to add fence.
So no detail is too small to add the depict statements, Andrew?
Well, that's a great question, Jeannie. It's like, obviously we need more work to say whether something is a main part of it or a background part of it, right? We do have some properties that do that in Wikidata, but we're not terribly consistent about it. So let's say add fence. Then the cool thing is that it kind of tells you whether you're adding something novel or something that's been added, that's well known in our depiction statements. So fence has been used in 152 other artworks. So I'm going to say add these artworks or add this to the artwork. And there we go. So we've added that statement to Wikidata. And the cool thing is that we kind of prod people to either work on more paintings by Rosa, or you can go and do more Met paintings, or you can keep going on, things that relate to the Salon of 1853. So this is kind of a nice way to, as Jane kind of said, go down the wormhole to say you start at this painting, but you can start to sprawl and look around and do other things out there. So this is the Art Depiction Explorer. And another way you can do it is to hone in on an artist. So you can actually go in here and say, let me see all the works by Rosa and see which ones need the depiction statements. So the ones here that don't have a blue label, these are asking for your help. So that's kind of neat to see that as a way to browse these things. And even just statements like horse or dog would be really helpful here for discovery on all these different paintings here. So those are just the 2 links that you'll find here for the Wiki Art Depiction Explorer, yet another way to contribute to Wikidata. All right, so let's see, any other questions? Otherwise, we will bring up Giovanna and have you meet her. So, hi, Giovanna.
Hello, Andrew. Hello, everyone.
Hi there. So we'd love for you to introduce yourself. Giovanna is actually in Brazil, one of our prolific contributors and very experienced with Wikidata and GLAM institutions. She's actually one of the world's experts on the integration of all these things, Wikipedia, Wikidata, and Wikimedia Commons with GLAM institutions. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've done, and what you're doing now.
So thank you, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me to this. It's a pleasure to be here. I am, as you were saying, someone who is very involved with the Wikidata Commons, Wikipedia in general community, even more in Brazil because I live here. And I have been a Wikimedian, as we say, for a few years now. I started in an education kind of program, and then after a year, I became a Wikimedian in residence. Richard is also a Wikimedian in residence at the Metropolitan, and I started as a Wikimedian in residence in an institution in Brazil, and it was called Neuromat, and together with this institution, I was a Wikimedian in residence in a museum called Policy Museum. And I started from there doing, what we call GLAM work, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And from that, project grew a lot, and we started to do a lot of things with Wikidata. I am part as a Wikimedian, not only as a volunteer, but I'm also a member of the Brazilian user group, the Wiki Movement Brazil user group. Is the group in Brazil that runs events like this one and GLAM initiatives and a lot of other projects. It's a really active group. And in this project, we started to do a lot of things, basically with Commons and Wikidata mostly. And there is a lot of things, nice things going on in this project until today. Right now, I am at the Wikimedia Foundation's GLAM team, GLAM and Culture team that works with those institutions in the way that they share content in our Wikimedia platforms. And yeah.
Great, thanks so much. That's and you were involved also with a project called Sum of All GLAMs, right? Trying to catalog like every single gallery, library, archive, museum in the world, which is not that easy, right? We don't have a common definition sometimes, right?
Yeah. So it was a very, interesting project because it aimed to do a lot, and we got to do a lot of interesting things, especially with Wikidata. As I was saying, when I was, doing this work with this museum and the user group, we got very, very interested in Wikidata. And so I was in a while trying to, come up with other projects with GLAM institutions, because that was what I was most enjoying doing in this Wikimedia environment. And then we started to work on this, and we got to do some statistics to know which kind of properties, that is properties we say in Wikidata is like the terminology for some specific statements that you put about an institution. So we were trying to understand which kind of statements, information that it was available usually with GLAM institutions, GLAM as institutions. So like which kind of properties museums use to their item on Wikidata. And so we did a lot of experiment with those kind of information. If you click on that tab there, Andrew, statistics, you may see some of them, for example, which is quite nice. Yes. And then you can see by country, for example, which kind of, of course, it could be even a longer table there with more information. But we chose some specific ones to kind of know where it was like the information that the institutions had more, more frequently, in some that they did not, and that depend on the country as well. But also, other than that, we also did some really interesting experiments with some tools. For example, Richard was talking about Mbabel, which was one of the tools that we dealt a lot within this project. Richard was the one to do this tool for artworks, and then we got really, really inspired by this, because we here in the Brazilian community, we think that not only Wikidata, but this tool specifically is a great way to attract and help new users, new editors, especially in events like this one, that we have a lot of new people coming in and trying to understand how they can contribute. And so this tool, Mbabel, we created some other templates that we call. As I said, Richard created the one for artworks, and then we started to do some templates for museums, archives, libraries, theaters, and to help people to get the information that was already on Wikidata about those institutions to Wikipedia. So we had, for example, the Mbabel in Portuguese and French, in English, and then we had the information on Wikidata, and we could easily transform that information on Wikidata to those templates. And then suddenly you have a kind of draft page about that museum or that specific archive. And that's also very interesting, not only in the language aspect, but also the small institution aspect, because sometimes you don't have enough people to do articles about every single institution in the world, and then you have it's easier to have their information on Wikidata because it's more structurable and easier to put in. And sometimes people just scratch some databases, and then you have that information already on Wikidata, and then you can easily transform that information to the Wikipedias, English, Portuguese, French, or even if you want to, I even invite people to create this template in other language, so we can have this in other, specifically I think even in smaller communities, that would be very nice to help people to get together and edit and add more information about GLAMs in general. And also, together with Mbabel templates, we also did very interesting work around what we call info boxes, or Wikidata info boxes, that we usually, when you open a tab on a page article on Wikipedia, you see on the side a box with a lot of information, and a lot of new users don't know where that come from exactly and how you construct that, especially in events like this. When I used to do them a lot, not in the online environment, that was one of the biggest kind of questions that people had to how do I do that box in the side? And it was a little bit tricky to teach them how to use. And then we have a very easier way to do that with Wikidata. And we did some templates that made you do that template very easily for museums, archives, libraries. And then you don't have to do exactly, you don't have to pre-fill every single information on that box on the side, and you kind of get to repeat the work that other people already have done on Wikidata, for example. But
yeah, nice.
A lot of information.
This might be a good way to loop back to a painting that you're very familiar with.
Yes.
One of the things that the Brazilian community has been very out in front of is actually all the stuff we're talking about with depiction information and adding it to provide context and content we really never had before. So this is a really famous painting, right, in Brazil. And if you mouse over it, look at all the information we have about it, not just what it depicts, but exactly where it is in the painting. So you folks are way out ahead in terms of modeling all this. So what this winds up looking like, not just as boxes, but if we look at the Wikidata item, this is the painting, which I'll give you a second to explain the significance of the painting. But if you just scroll down to the depiction section, it's not just what it depicts, but my goodness, look at this. It's Maria Leopoldina of Austria where she is and that she has red hair. She's sitting. She has a dress. She has a bracelet. Brown. Oh, whoa. So tell us about this painting, because this is hyper detailed metadata that you have.
Yes. So this painting is it's actually very nice that you remembered this one specifically, because it's a very feminist kind of painting. It was, here in Brazil we have our independence, and we say that it was done by, it was kind of a different kind of independence, because it was not made by the people, but by the governors already, that were governors already. And we have the person who was our kind of king here, emperor, and he was the one who claimed the independence. But this painting specifically, it shows a different kind of side of the story, because Maria Leopoldina, who is sitting there, was his wife. And a lot of historians say that she was the one coordinating some of the part of the independence process. And this is her signing a letter that is convincing him to actually claim the independence. And she was obviously not very known in history because of that. We have a lot of other paintings with her and children, and her, as her mother's whole role in history. But this was a very important painting because of that, because it shows her as, a woman sitting among all of those important men, making this important Brazilian, history aspect being, developed. So yeah, it is very important for us, and it was one of our, favorite to actually do this kind of work. So yeah. And I remember doing that. You were also with us when we started to kind of pick it around. It was very nice.
Yeah, and we are just getting the tools lined up so that doing all this is a lot easier than it is now. But it still is a lot of hand editing at this point, right? It's not drag and drop.
Very difficult to do that numbers, the position with an image. It was quite hard to do that a while ago, and now it's easier.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have any in the folks watching it. So some folks were like, this whole story in that painting. It is fascinating story. Even I remember you telling me that even the time on the clock is important and all that stuff, right? And that specific table as well, because it has 3 legs and a different kind of table, and it's a very important painting for us. Yeah. So for folks who are wondering, maybe you're from the museum and library world, we're still trying to do better with multimedia in Commons. We don't really play nice with other standards of what other museums and libraries do, but I think that's in the cards in the future. Yeah, I think people are trying to implement IIIF to do this easier, but it's still a working process. That's all I can say about that. Yeah. No worries. Well, thank you for joining us. And what we can do is get some of your reactions or some of your recommendations as we look at some of the things in the task list. Also, just as a quick shout out, because you were showing that painting, and there is also another way to kind of add some kind of similar information that is distributed on Commons. I'm working with this directly now, and when you click on an image like that one that Andrew was showing, you can see right after the image a place that you can add some structured information that it makes the information more findable, more usable, more translatable for other languages as well. And it's an interesting thing if you want to kind of collaborate in this aspect as well, in like describing image in that information box. Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. If anyone is interested in looking at that, it's this is the URL Commons structured data. If you just do a Google search on structured data on Wikimedia Commons, you'll get this page, and you can even kind of watch a video describing kind of the future of combining Wikidata like things you just saw today with images, and that's really powerful. Yeah, and if anyone is out there involved with a GLAM institution like a library or a museum, do feel free to get in touch and try some of these things out there. There's a lot of neat things going on. Yeah. So Richard, can you give us any reflections on what you might have seen out there so far, or some things that people could try out?
Yeah, we've seen a couple of articles started with Mbabble. So there's an article on the memorial head from Ghana. There's Jane started an article on a painting. There's a nice article on a sort of a squirrel painting from Japan that's been started. And we're still collecting the dashboard, as unfortunately it has quite a bit of a lag on it, but we have about 70 something editors there, and we're getting the different information from them. And there's also been some discussions on the chat mechanism on so chat.wikimuseum.org. If people want to participate in there for more individualized help, especially around issues like Wikidata. People had issues with Tabernacle, trying to figure out, how do you. There was an artist who had an insufficient number of aliases on Wikidata, so so it was hard to find her item because she was known by her middle initial, and there's a whole thing. So
right.
It's another thing.
And Richard, that chat will be up after the event. So
yeah,
correct?
Yeah. So we will be. Some people mentioned in the chat also that it was. It felt a bit like there was a lot of information coming very quickly, and a lot of topics covered. And so one of the ways we want to help support people going was that for the rest of the month of March, we have that chat going, and people can participate there if you want any individualized help or discussion about this or the other events for Wiki Women's History Month and other gender gap topics this month. And we can also set things up in different languages if people want that, if there's sufficient demand.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hopefully this is just the start of the journey for you folks. Absolutely feel free to keep dialoguing in that channel or get in touch with any of us. We're very open to collaboration on these things long term, or even just keep coming back to this page and keep working on these tools. If you want to, you can even go to the talk page on here. Let me show you on the screen for a second. So this is the project page that we're working on now, but you can even go to the talk page here and leave a note there, and we'll keep watching that page for any kind of comments. That's another thing we didn't show you quite yet, is that you can actually click on this little star here, and then if you're logged in, that is now put on your watch list so that anytime someone makes a modification to that page, you'll get notified of that in Wikipedia. So that's kind of nice of having your own kind of bookmarks list. We call it a watch list in Wikipedia. So yeah, feel free to keep working on this because it is a lot. It's a lot, but we wanted to show you different ways of contributing because in the end, a lot of these are actually easier ways to contribute, even though learning about them might be a little bit new to you and foreign to you. So,
yeah.
Can I get one last question?
Mm-hmm.
So I published that little article because I managed to find some more information about the donor of the painting. I'm like, okay, great, another external reference. I'm done. But I'm wondering what happens to the draft. It just hangs out there until somebody comes along and deletes it, or can you guys delete it?
Usually we would just move the draft. But if
I don't even know how to do that, so I just published it.
Okay, that's fine. Then
fine.
we can just redirect it. We'll just make it so people don't create it again.
Thanks.
Yeah, the plight of drafts is always different, right, in terms of what state they're in. They're usually pretty safe to just be sitting there to be worked on. But then when you submit it, then hopefully you'll get into the queue of folks who will review it. But it could take some time for that. Yeah. Jeannie, do you have any observations or things that you want to take a look at or to note?
No, I just want to thank everyone for coming and helping us add more, contribute to global knowledge about women and women in the arts. And again, if you are in the New York City area, please come see our Alice Neal exhibition, which opens on March 22nd, or attend the virtual opening, which will be on March 25th.
That's right. And the virtual opening is going to be on YouTube and the same channel that we're on now. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. And you can sign up. You can register. You need to register for it on our exhibition, on the exhibition page.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, there. If you go down here, you can see all the different. There's us right there, but you can see the other types of content that we have here related to Women's History Month. All right, so I encourage folks, if you are in the chat, let us know any Wikidata items you've been working on, or any images that you've done, or just tell us what kind of things you've discovered or tried editing, and let us know, because this is all very useful feedback for us as we try to set up more events going forward. I know it's a lot to pack into a 2-hour period, but hopefully we've opened a whole universe of different things that you never knew about in the Wikimedia universe. Wikidata is becoming a very popular thing among museums and libraries for working with the content that we have, and you just now have a small window into the types of things that are possible with that.
Yeah,
I want to just say that I'm really glad you actually went ahead and did that presentation. I hope that it's going to be something people can follow when they see it in replay mode. The advantage of replay mode is you can actually stop it while you go and check those links, and then go back and then, replay it again if you didn't get it the first time. But I also just wanted to quickly put out there that if anybody's interested in Edmonia Lewis, I think this would be an excellent case for working on sculptures and trying to get individual sculptures onto Wikidata and into Wikipedia, even if the same model has been, used and produced several different times. I think she would be a very good case to go ahead and do as a sculpture.
And we have actually one of our better articles on her works is on Hiawatha and Minnehaha, which was written editathon at the Met by Heather Hart, who's an artist and a Wikipedian, and the organizer of the Black Lunch Table Wikimedia group. And so, it would be great to have more of those articles. Actually, something that would be interesting if anyone wants to do the research for it is that Edmonia Lewis was part of like a whole group of American women around Rome and Italy in the 19th century. And I wonder if that should be a Wikipedia article too.
I was just discussing this earlier today, that Smith College sent tons of art history students to Rome to do copies. And then they had their own gallery at Smith College of the copies. Some of them were excellent copies. And I think they did get rid of all the copies because they thought, we don't want second-rate stuff. We only want first-rate stuff. And I'm thinking, who's to say copies aren't first-rate? We treasure the John Singer Sargent copies that he made, everywhere he went in Europe. So I really think that we need to do a little revival of the women who went en masse to Europe and did all those copies and did all those studies and all those summer courses. Yeah, let's see what we can get. I don't know if the Met has any information about any of their artists who started that way. But certainly, even in Alice Neal's time, right? She was still doing that. She went to Paris. Oh, she didn't. She wanted to go to Paris, right? She couldn't afford it. She had a nervous breakdown. That's in her little film on YouTube, the long one. Yeah. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's nice to connect with everyone. So usually we have the different meta-editathons. Usually this time of year we have the art and feminism editathons, which are
I miss you guys.
And we have there are a lot of very nice in-person things. We can we have like 100 or 200 people in a room, and it's able to it's a little bit easier to work in person, but we're trying to experiment with how to do things virtually, and probably in the future we'll try to do more hybrid events, so we're using both virtual and in-person things.
Richard, about that, I want to again give a shout out to what Kira was saying a few minutes before. Because we don't know that this is a metropolitan kind of event, so we have a lot of people probably from backgrounds that we don't know exactly where. And just to let you know that it's possible to organize something like that we are organizing on your area or your region. Maybe you are connected to a GLAM institution or a university, and you like to do some events like this, what we call it editathons, but events, Wikimedia events. And Kira was saying before, there are grants to help with that, or even you could look for your Wikimedia affiliate or group or chapter to kind of organize something with a team that you like, or even enhance a field. There is not only, you know, artists, women artists, but a woman in science or a woman in history. So there is a lot of things that you can also do, not only edit, but also organize Wikimedia activities. And yeah.
Yeah, and for folks who, after this editathon is over, because we're running a little bit over, but after this, you can also track us in the Wikipedia community. If you go to Wikipedia Weekly, there's a Facebook group, there's a Twitter handle, there's also a YouTube channel. And we actually have folks who do a weekly Wikidata, just free-form Wikidata jam session. So if anyone is interested in seeing more Wikidata work on a casual basis and a regular basis, you can always go to the Wikipedia Weekly channel and see those.
I can highly recommend those. Those are excellent.
Thanks,
Jan's work is, and Jan and Alban, they're my heroes.
Yeah, we have Jan and Alban, who are very experienced Wikidata editors. Alban was a former Wikimedian in residence at a museum, and they take requests. So you could even say, hey, let's take some of the stuff we worked on for this editathon and make it the topic of the next week's editathon. So we absolutely welcome you to partake in that. And it's great to see some folks saying that they had 61 Wikidata edits. That's nice.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes adding these little statements are more rewarding than editing a Wikipedia article. It's quite cool to see these things stack up and saying one edit there, make for interesting connections. So I thought I could also show you what happens when we added some more information to this knowledge graph now. So it's more connected than before. At least we now have at least some depiction information for Indian combat. So now you can start to see how these artworks are not just in isolation, but they're showing common themes here. We probably need to add more to these, but it's a nice start to see the network of depiction statements start to build up for at least Edmonia Lewis's pieces here. But we will need to add more artworks as well. Anything else before we call it a day for folks? So do check back to the dashboard. Richard, is the dashboard on this page here at the bottom? Where is it?
Yeah, it's where it says sign up on the dashboard. There's like a little button. So that's sort of how it's it's an action point.
Right. So it does take some time to update.
Yeah, so it'll take a while to update everything, you know, but actually let us know if you're doing working stuff in particular languages, because we sometimes have to set that manually. But
right. We'd love to see this go up, but we normally
you can sign in, and if you're doing other edits, you can also sign in. We'll try to find the ones that are relevant. You don't have to. It's a technological thing, but if you want to sign in, you're very welcome to sign in, even if you're doing other stuff.
Right. That's great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Again, keep working. I know it's a lot to absorb, but if you keep going back to these lists, there's like days and weeks worth of content that you could add with these work lists here. And thank you, Jane and Giovanna, for joining us. We love your contributions, and thanks for giving us some context around all these things. All right.
Bye.
Great. So any final chat messages, let us know. We'd love to highlight a last few things that you might have added or things that you might have learned, but hopefully you found something interesting during the editathon, the meetup that we showed you lots of interesting things, but hopefully they'll start to stick. So, all right. So maybe what we'll do, Jeannie, is on our last play out, we'll play the Alice Neal video one last time, because for folks who might not have seen it, that's a nice way to kind of show you that at the very end.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let me take this down.
I like to paint. I love to paint. In fact, I feel as though I'm living for a purpose, you know, that life isn't just empty. One of the reasons I painted was to catch life as it goes by, hot off the griddle. After all, I represent the 20th century. I was born in 1900, and I've tried to capture the zeitgeist. I lived in Harlem for 25 years, Spanish Harlem. I wanted to show the environment plus the people that were living there. And if the world changes, of course your vision changes in a sense with the times. It isn't just that I'm older, it's that people also are different. Maybe I have changed also, I don't know. I don't feel either that there is definite female painting, you know. I don't think there's an iconography that goes especially with women. Long before they talked about being autobiographical, I was, and yet not completely, because there's aesthetics in my work. You see, art for me was more than a profession, it was also an obsession. I painted in obscurity for years and years. If I didn't paint all the time, I probably wouldn't live. That's what keeps me alive.